I survived something I had long considered impossible to tell anyone about. What opened to me on the other side of our earthly existence literally leaves one speechless. Only 8 years after that incredible event did I finally decide to share what I had lived through. First, I spoke about it openly to my wife, and to my surprise, she neither smiled skeptically nor doubted my words. On the contrary, she was genuinely interested in what had happened to me there, where the path is closed to the living. Thus began the confession of the emergency physician Nikolai Podsvirov, who had worked for many years in intensive care and once found himself in a situation where other doctors had to fight for his own life. Nikolai Podsvirov himself admitted that earlier he was not at all concerned with the question of whether patients experienced anything after death or not. But when he himself ended up in another world, his attitude changed radically. Everything happened like this. In the summer of 1978, Nikolai Podsvirov, who had then turned 50, suddenly had his heart stop right in the middle of the workday. And everything that happened after that turned his life upside down. According to him, the most shocking thing was the fact that even after his heart stopped, he continued to exist, but in a form he could never have imagined. The last thought that flashed through his mind before losing consciousness was about his teenage son. How would he live without his father now? And then came darkness. But not for long. Very soon he regained consciousness, and this return turned out to be nothing like what he expected. Something was happening to him so incredible that it absolutely did not fit into his former atheist worldview. Nikolai Podsvirov was sure that after the attack, he would wake up in a hospital ward, at worst, in intensive care. However, instead he realized that he was rushing through some black tunnel, and the speed at which he moved kept increasing. This both terrified him and, strangely, gave him a sense of extraordinary freedom. He recounted, "I was speeding so fast that I couldn't understand whether anything was around me. After a moment, the darkness turned into light. It was so bright I couldn't look at it. But soon the glare stopped blinding me, and I was able to look around. And suddenly I realized I was in a hospital room, just as I had expected. But it wasn't ordinary. Its walls glowed with a soft white light. Then I noticed that my vision had changed. It was not like it had been in life. I somehow unbelievably saw everything happening around me regardless of where I directed my gaze. Moreover, I could even see through opaque objects. But the most surprising thing, I did not see myself and had no idea what I looked like now." He went on to describe that in this state he did not hear voices, but he knew the thoughts of the people around him, as if he could read their minds. At some point, thinking of his family, he thought of his home, and instantly appeared there. He saw his wife and tried to explain everything he was experiencing. He stood right in front of her, spoke anxiously, but she did not see him. Moreover, she simply walked right through him. And then Nikolai realized that he could not establish any connection with her. After this, he experienced something he called his personal purgatory. He said, "While I was outside my body, my whole life flashed before my eyes, from the very cradle. I saw it through the angle of my own guilt before people. And this is no exaggeration. The feeling of shame was so strong that tears of repentance flowed from my eyes. And no matter how I tried to convince myself that I had nothing to be ashamed of, that I had done nothing truly bad, it was useless. It turns out you cannot deceive your own soul." When he relived every dishonest or wrong deed and sincerely regretted what he had done, some powerful current seemed to grab him and throw him back into the dark tunnel. He felt the speed of his movement gradually decrease, the light recede, and then he literally fell back into his body. Later, he admitted that the return felt cold, sticky, and extremely unpleasant. After coming back, he promised himself that he would one day tell people about what he had experienced, so they would understand not only the reality of life after death, but also that it is directly connected to our actions in this world. Nikolai Podsvirov also said, "After I found myself on the other side, it's hard for me to listen to people claiming that no one has ever returned from there, because I, and those like me, are direct proof. We returned. So denying this is the height of absurdity. I want to ask those smart Alex, how exactly were we supposed to come back? in the form of revived corpses? Alas, it is impossible to prove anything to a person who does not wish to listen, for the matter lies not in the evidence itself, but in his inner drive to deny everything outright. But to those who are able to hear, I do share my unusual experience of being on the other side of life. Another person who managed to return from there was the outstanding physicist Vladimir Efremov, the very one who personally took part in launching Gagarin and worked on creating spacecraft. His reputation in the scientific world was impeccable, and yet, risking his career, he too once experienced a journey to the afterlife, and then returned with a message addressed to humanity. Once, while visiting his sister, he felt a severe coughing fit caused by chronic bronchitis. Breathing became increasingly difficult, his body grew weaker, and soon he lost consciousness. What followed was cardiac arrest. As he took his last heavy breath, he clearly realized that his life was coming to an end. But then Efremov suddenly felt a pleasant weightlessness. The most astonishing thing was that his consciousness continued to function despite his heart having stopped. Later he compared this state to a childlike lightness, or the feeling of flying in a dream. As with many who experienced something similar, once separated from his body, he found himself in a vast tunnel and was rapidly flying toward a bright light. He did not feel a body, but he perceived everything happening around him, and surprisingly there was no fear, no anxiety, no panic. He said, "Everything around seemed new and amazing. My consciousness embraced everything at once. For it, there were no distances, no time. The space looked like a folded cylinder filled with even light without shadows. On its walls, I saw structures resembling relief. It was hard for me to understand where the top was and where the bottom was, and I thought, if I understand all this, it means I continue to exist." In the tunnel, Efremov felt another unbelievable detail. He knew everything about the world he had left behind. His memory seemed to go beyond human perception and merge with the universe. He emphasized that there, beyond the boundary of life, there are far more than 3 dimensions. He said, "My interaction with the surroundings was no longer one-sided. As soon as I formulated a mental question, the answer appeared instantly, from who knows where." He recounted that processes in that realm occur not sequentially, as they do here, but in all directions at once. Each object is perceived as an informational block, and then something happened that overturned his entire understanding of reality. Efremov noticed that he was being guided by some omnipresent entity, invisible, yet entirely tangible. It seemed to be trying not to frighten him, showing him phenomena and the connections between them. He said, "I did not see it with my eyes, but felt a spiritual contact. I do not know whether it was a guardian angel, a guide, or the Lord himself. More likely his manifestation. The main thing is, they truly meet us there, and they care about us." However, along the way he also had to endure unpleasant sensations. He felt that something was holding him back, not allowing him to rise higher, as if someone were pulling him downward like a plant from the ground. After that, he abruptly returned to his body. His first words shocked his sister. He said, "There is no end. There is life there too, just not the kind we have here." In 7 minutes of earthly time, he went through a colossal spiritual experience. His soul saw what is inaccessible to an ordinary person. Later, after recovering, he told his family that death no longer frightened him, for it is merely a door to another space. And here it is worth recalling the story of the neurologist Georgy Rodon. He said, "What I saw beyond the boundary of life will leave no one indifferent, and it does not matter whether you believe or not, the afterlife is nothing like what people tell." His clinical death is considered one of the longest in the world. It lasted several days. He returned from the morgue. It all began in 1976, when he was hit by a car. He was taken to intensive care in extremely serious condition, but they could not save him. However, for him, death became not an end, but the beginning of a journey. He recalled, "I was observing everything that was happening as if from the outside. One thought kept spinning in my head. How can I be if I am not? And then I understood the full horror of my situation. But the most terrifying part came afterward. An invisible current carried his soul away, and a dreadful stage of wandering began. Darkness thickened around him rapidly. He felt as if he were falling into sleep, but was not asleep. The darkness seemed to press upon him, becoming dense and sticky. He said, "I did not feel a body and did not feel pain, but I understood. I am still me." And all around, absolute darkness. It pressed on me, and I was not prepared for this. But I pulled myself together and tried to understand what was happening. But nothing comforting or encouraging came to mind. I kept asking myself over and over, why did I end up in this darkness? What should I do? I understood only one thing. I still existed, although I was clearly in another dimension. And suddenly, like a moment of insight, the thought came to me that besides darkness, there must also be light. As soon as I thought about light, I noticed that the surrounding darkness began to dissolve. Soon an intense white glow appeared around me, so bright that Rodonaya compared it to a continuous camera flash. Gradually he grew accustomed to this radiance and felt a calm warmth and an astonishing sense of comfort emanating from it. He described it further as follows. Having grown used to the bright light, I began to look around, and suddenly I saw that the space around me consisted of tiny particles, the very ones we call molecules and atoms during life. At first their movement seemed chaotic, but then I understood. Within this chaos, there was a wondrous symmetry. According to Rodonaya, at that moment, the all-encompassing form of all living things appeared before him. Admiring this beauty, he felt his anxiety about his situation completely vanish. Fear disappeared, worry about the body faded, and the limitations that had restrained his perception of life after death dissolved. Soon another radiance appeared, a golden disk resembling the sun. Its light penetrated directly into his consciousness. Rodonaya felt himself become part of this light, and waves of indescribable ecstasy washed over him. Now it seemed to him that everything happening was natural and logical. He sensed a deep order and meaning in what he was experiencing. He understood. The existence of an otherworldly realm gives earthly life a higher logic. Everything fell into place. Endless evolution, spiritual development, the continuity of existence. Rodonaya saw his entire life at once, from birth to the final moment on the operating table. He watched and participated in it simultaneously, as if viewing a three-dimensional hologram where all moments exist at once. He realized life exists everywhere, and it is endless. Only the forms of manifestation change, but the essence of being does not cease. Everything in the world is interconnected and forms a single whole. It would seem that his journey should have ended here, but something else happened. So shocking that he later admitted he could not recall it for a long time without trembling. While his soul was in other realms, his body had already been delivered to the morgue. The pathologist made a longitudinal incision to open the chest cavity, and at that very moment, Rodonaya opened his eyes. At first the doctor assumed it was a simple reflex and closed the eyelids again, but the eyes opened once more. The medic, shaken to the core, brought a lamp to his face and saw that the pupils reacted to light. Rodonaya was immediately rushed to intensive care. Everyone was stunned. Too much time had passed since the moment of death, but the one already considered a corpse suddenly returned to life. When in intensive care, the doctors tried to bring him back to consciousness. Georgie's soul felt some force push him down, roughly, almost violently, into a black abyss of pain and horror. And after some time he awoke in his own body. Later he said, "The afterlife is the continuation of the soul. Treacherous and evil people will find themselves in the darkest regions of the otherworldly realm, while bright and kind souls will live in the higher spheres of being endlessly."